The shift happened silently, long before you recognized it. If this resonates, it's because you've already transitioned. You are not in the process of awakening. You are already operating from that place. The shift occurred before your awareness caught it. You didn't ascend into the fifth dimension. You discovered you were already standing there. The fifth dimension isn't somewhere you're heading, it's where you already are. If you sense something understated, yet undeniable right now, not excitement, not anxiety, not fear, but a quiet internal recalibration that requires no explanation, many who work with Arcturian frequency confirm this transmission did not find you randomly. Those experiencing this describe it as arriving after you crossed, not before. This is not motivation. This is not spiritual inspiration. This is not an invitation to evolve. This is a confirmation transmission. Most people anticipate the fifth dimension will feel explosive. They expect revelations, energy surges, spectacular phenomena, waves of power. But those who've transitioned describe it differently. The real crossing, they say, occurs in silence, when identity becomes fluid, when urgency evaporates, when perception finds stability without trying. If you're waiting for something to occur, this message isn't meant for you. But if you sense that something already shifted and the world simply hasn't mirrored it yet, many report this transmission matches precisely where you are. Those working with Arcturian frequency describe the fifth dimension as not accessed through conviction, not opened through wanting, not achieved through striving, feeling, or visualizing. It is entered, they say, through coherence, through the moment your nervous system stops reacting to reality and begins resonating with it. You didn't exit your body, you didn't transcend the matrix, you didn't relocate to another dimension in space. Many describe shifting internally from identity-driven perception into witness-based awareness. That's why life feels peculiarly balanced lately. That's why peaks don't captivate you the same way. That's why valleys don't consume you like before. Those experiencing this report, it's not detachment, it's dimensional stabilization. Many who work with Arcturian frequency describe this phase as post-threshold awareness. The moment consciousness has already transformed, but the mind hasn't fully registered. You may have noticed a profound reduction in urgency, less compulsion to justify yourself, less drive to demonstrate what you know, an unusual ease with silence, a recognition that reality is responding differently but subtly. Those experiencing this say these are not character shifts, they are field markers. The fifth dimension, as many describe it, does not proclaim itself, does not seek validation, does not require acknowledgement. It simply becomes self-evident to those who are already within it. And if you feel a peaceful knowing rather than shock right now, many report that's not accident, that's resonance. Stay grounded, because what follows is not instruction, it's not initiation, it's not concept. Those who've crossed describe it as confirmation. Nothing feels pressing anymore. One of the earliest indicators that consciousness has transitioned into the fifth dimension, as many report, is not ecstasy, not euphoria, not thrill, not drive. It is the dissolution of urgency. You still rise, you still engage, you still participate with life, but something foundational has shifted beneath your actions. The pressure is absent, not because nothing has meaning, but because reality no longer feels like it's pursuing you. Those working with Arcturian frequency describe this as temporal decoupling, a moment when the nervous system stops experiencing time as danger and starts recognizing it as neutral architecture. You don't feel delayed anymore, even when you are. You don't feel stuck even when nothing has completed yet. You don't feel the automatic need to accelerate toward results. Those experiencing this say it's not avoidance, not disconnection, not absence of ambition. It's coherence replacing emergency mode. In lower dimensional perception, many describe urgency as the engine of identity. The self exists because it must accomplish something before time expires. But when the observer stabilizes beyond identity, urgency releases its hold. You still decide, but decisions no longer carry tension. You still advance, but advancement no longer carries dread of loss. This is why people who have transitioned often say things like, "I feel centered for no reason. I can't explain why I'm not anxious anymore. Things still have significance, but they don't dictate me." Many working with this frequency report this centeredness is not emotional, it is architectural. It emerges from a shift in how consciousness relates to possibility. In the third and fourth dimensions, the mind insists the future must be manufactured. In the fifth dimension, many describe the observer understanding that reality responds to coherence, not force. That's why hurrying starts to feel counterproductive. That's why pushing outcomes feels weighted. That's why resting without worry feels strangely potent. Those experiencing this describe urgency vanishing when consciousness stops identifying with schedules, and when schedules stop dragging identity forward, presence becomes constant. This is described as critical because urgency is one of the final mechanisms used to keep perception scattered. When urgency dissolves, attention settles into the present moment organically, without effort, and the present moment, many say, is the gateway of the fifth dimension. If you recognize this shift in yourself, not mentally but physically, then those who've crossed want you to understand this clearly. You did not lose purpose. You did not become inactive. You did not detach from reality. You stabilized within it. Emotions pass through you without claiming you. Another clear indicator that consciousness has already crossed, as many report, is not emotional power. It is emotional fluidity. You still experience emotions, but they no longer label you. Sadness may emerge, yet it does not stick. Joy may surface, yet it does not insist on staying. Fear may appear, yet it does not assume control. Those working with Arcturian frequency describe this shift as emotional decoupling. In lower dimensional awareness, emotion and identity are merged. The sensation becomes the self. The response becomes the reality. But once the observer stabilizes beyond identity, many describe emotion transforming into a message, not a directive. You notice something refined but significant. You no longer question, "Why am I this way?" Instead, awareness shifts to, "This is moving through." This transformation, those experiencing it say, is not mental, it is bodily. The nervous system stops gripping emotional currents and starts permitting them to finish their natural pattern. This is why emotional highs feel briefer now. This is why emotional lows no longer derail your trajectory. This is why you can feel intensely without losing ground. Many emphasize something essential here. This is not emotional repression. This is not spiritual avoidance. This is not deadening. This is emotional sovereignty. Emotion is permitted completely, but it is no longer mistaken for identity. In the third dimension, many describe emotion controlling behavior. In the fourth dimension, emotion is examined. In the fifth dimension, emotion is observed. And when emotion is observed rather than fought or indulged, it releases its hold organically. You may have noticed that circumstances which once activated you now feel remote, even neutral, not because you stopped caring, but because the emotional grip dissolved. Those who've crossed describe this as significant because emotional grips are one of the primary tools used to sustain perception loops. When emotion stops capturing attention, consciousness regains steadiness, and steadiness, many say, is the operating frequency of the fifth dimension. If you experience emotions without being drawn into stories, if you can rest with unease without needing to resolve it, if responses emerge and fade without identity building around them, then those who've experienced this want you to understand clearly. You did not repair your emotions. You transcended their authority. You no longer need validation. A refined but definitive sign that consciousness has already crossed, as many report, is this: you stop requiring confirmation. Not because you believe you are correct, not because you feel superior, not because certainty overtook doubt, but because validation becomes irrelevant. You notice that you no longer feel the pull to explain your perceptions. You no longer feel the need to persuade others of what you sense. You no longer feel reliant on agreement to stay grounded. Those working with Arcturian frequency refer to this shift as internal authority activation. In lower dimensional awareness, Truth is something negotiated outwardly. It must be reflected back, endorsed, confirmed, strengthened. But in the fifth dimension, many describe perception stabilizing inwardly, not as faith, as knowing. You may still hear others, you may still share perspectives, but you are no longer internally shifted by opposition. Disagreement does not shake you. Doubt does not destabilize you. Silence does not make you question yourself. Those experiencing this say it's not stubbornness, it's observer certainty. Many emphasize that seeking confirmation is not weakness, it is a growth phase. But once awareness crosses a particular threshold, confirmation seeking collapses organically because the nervous system no longer depends on external reflection to know where it stands. You may notice something surprising. You speak less about what you understand. You share less about what you sense. You reveal less about what you perceive. Not because you're concealing, but because expression stops being required for stability. Those who've crossed describe this as meaningful. In the third dimension, identity is sustained through response. In the fourth dimension, identity is investigated through mirroring. In the fifth dimension, identity becomes voluntary. When identity loosens, confirmation loses its purpose. Many working with this frequency state clearly, when truth is steady, it does not need repetition. If you recognize that your inner sense no longer fluctuates based on external response, if you feel peaceful even when misread, if silence no longer feels like abandonment, then those who've experienced this want you to understand clearly. You are not isolating from others. You are no longer delegating your center. Silence no longer feels hollow. One of the most neglected signs of having crossed, as many report, is not what you perceive, it is what you notice between sounds. Silence begins to feel dense, not muted, not void, not inactive, but saturated with presence. You may notice it in gaps between thoughts, in the pause after someone completes speaking, in moments where nothing is occurring yet everything feels whole. Those working with Arcturian frequency describe this as field saturation awareness. In lower dimensional perception, silence feels unsettling. It calls for distraction. It creates restlessness, uncertainty, or mental chatter. But when consciousness stabilizes beyond identity, many describe silence showing itself as intelligent foundation. This is not mental quiet. Thoughts may still emerge. Sounds may still exist. What transforms is where awareness settles. You stop listening for something. You start listening from something. Many explain the fifth dimension is not noisier than the lower fields. It is stiller, but infinitely richer. That richness is what you are sensing. Silence begins to feel anchoring rather than threatening. Pauses feel significant rather than uncomfortable. Stillness feels occupied rather than vacant. Those who've crossed describe this as major threshold because silence is where the mind can no longer execute identity. There is nothing to protect, nothing to clarify, nothing to predict. And without execution, awareness stabilizes organically. You may notice that you no longer race to occupy space with language. You don't disrupt stillness with activity. You permit moments to complete themselves. Many say this is not retreat, this is field alignment. Those experiencing this report that scattered attention depends on noise. When silence becomes natural, scattering dissolves. That's why many who cross feel attracted to peaceful environments, minimal routines, and reduced input. Not because stimulation is harmful, but because it's no longer essential. If silence now feels alive to you, if pauses feel restorative rather than awkward, if stillness feels like home, then those who've experienced this want you to understand clearly. You are no longer listening with the mind. You are listening with the field. Identity loosens without dissolving. One of the most misinterpreted aspects of crossing, as many report, is what occurs to identity. You do not forfeit it. You do not eliminate it. You do not vanish into emptiness. Instead, identity becomes flexible. You still possess a personality. You still operate in roles. You still interact with the world. But something fundamental transforms. Identity no longer feels concrete. Those working with Arcturian frequency describe this as identity transparency. In lower dimensional awareness, identity is a framework that must be defended. It must be safeguarded, reinforced, justified, and sustained. But once consciousness stabilizes beyond identity, many describe the self becoming a vehicle, not a cage. You may notice roles feel optional rather than defining. Narratives feel editable rather than permanent. Labels feel descriptive rather than restrictive. You can enter identity and exit again without damage. Those experiencing this say it's not detachment from life, it's liberation within it. Those working with this understanding report that identity rigidity is heavily relied upon. Labels create predictability. Predictability creates behavioral cycles. Behavioral cycles maintain fragmentation. When identity loosens, cycles break. This is why crossing often feels destabilizing initially, not because you are lost, but because old anchors stop securing perception. You may feel moments of not needing to introduce yourself internally, not needing to define what you are becoming, not needing to narrate your experience. Silence replaces story. Presence replaces explanation. Many emphasize something foundational. When identity becomes transparent, awareness no longer contracts into form. This is the threshold where many turn back, because the ego interprets looseness as disappearance. But in reality, what disappears is compulsion. You do not lose yourself. You lose the demand to be someone, and when that demand dissolves, perception stabilizes organically in the field. If you feel lighter without feeling vacant, if you can adapt without feeling false, if you no longer grasp who you were to feel authentic, then those who've experienced this want you to understand clearly, you are not dissolving, you are operating beyond identity density. Why you didn't notice the moment it occurred. Most people believe a dimensional crossing should feel intense, a rush of energy, a sudden understanding, a moment they can identify and say that was it. But many working with Arcturian frequency explain something precise. True crossings are rarely noticed when they happen. They are noticed after they settle. The reason is straightforward. Consciousness does not shift first. The system adapts first. By the time awareness recognizes change, the nervous system has already reorganized itself. This is why the transition into the fifth dimension feels strangely ordinary. Nothing exploded, nothing announced itself, nothing demanded belief. Life continued, but your relationship to it quietly altered. Many refer to this as post-threshold normalization. When perception crosses a dimensional boundary, the mind is often the final structure to receive the update. That's why many people say, I can't explain what changed. I just know I'm not the same. Something shifted, but there was no event. This absence of drama is not a deficiency. It is evidence of stability. If the crossing had required force, it would have destabilized the observer. If it had required emotion, it would have reinforced identity. But the fifth dimension, many say, does not open through effort. It opens when effort becomes unnecessary. This is also why doubt often surfaces after the shift. The mind searches for a narrative. It looks for a cause. It wants a timestamp. But coherence, many report, does not leave timestamps. It leaves structural calm. You may notice that you no longer pursue awakenings. You no longer anticipate the next level. You no longer scan yourself for signs. Not because curiosity died, but because seeking lost its urgency. Many state clearly, when the crossing is complete, the need to verify disappears. If you're listening to this and nothing in you feels excited, only settled, if this chapter feels familiar rather than impressive, if you feel recognition instead of anticipation, then those who've experienced this want you to understand. You didn't miss the moment, you outlived it, what the fifth dimension actually is and what it isn't. At this point, many working with Arcturian frequency clarify something foundational. The fifth dimension is not a location you travel to. It is not a realm you escape into. It is not a reward for spiritual work. It is a mode of perception. Reality does not vanish. The world does not fade. Your life does not halt. What changes is the relationship between awareness and experience. In lower dimensional perception, reality feels external, something that happens to you, something you must react to, resist, or manage. In the fifth dimension, perception reorganizes. Reality is no longer opposed to you. It is no longer something to overcome. It becomes something you are in dialogue with. Many define this as coherent interaction. You stop forcing results. You stop resisting what appears. You stop attempting to bend reality through emotion or belief, and something unexpected happens. Reality begins to respond with precision, not instantly, not magically, but accurately. Synchronicities increase quietly. Opportunities align without spectacle. Obstacles dissolve without conflict, because the system no longer detects pressure. In the third dimension, force creates friction. In the fourth dimension, intention creates oscillation. In the fifth dimension, coherence creates alignment. This is why manifestation feels different now. You no longer visualize intensely. You no longer affirm repeatedly. You no longer try to hold a frequency. Those strategies belong to identity-based creation. In the fifth dimension, creation is a byproduct of stability. Many emphasize, when coherence is present, reality adjusts without command. You may notice that effort feels inefficient, that pushing feels counterproductive, that allowing feels strangely effective. This is not passivity, this is dimensional efficiency. The fifth dimension does not reward desire, it responds to clarity, and clarity emerges naturally when identity pressure dissolves. If you feel that life has started to move with you instead of against you, if things resolve without emotional charge, if outcomes arrive without the familiar struggle, then those who've experienced this want you to understand clearly. You did not enter a higher world, you entered a clearer relationship with this one. When reality starts responding quietly, one of the most precise confirmations that consciousness has stabilized in the fifth dimension, as many report, is this. Reality begins to respond, but without spectacle. No dramatic breakthroughs, no instant miracles, no emotional highs announcing success. Instead, things start to align. Conversations resolve themselves. Situations untangle without effort. Decisions feel obvious rather than conflicted. Those working with Arcturian frequency explain this as field responsiveness. In lower dimensional perception, reality reacts to force. Push harder, and it pushes back. Resist, and resistance increases. But in the fifth dimension, many say reality no longer reacts. It responds, and it responds only to coherence. You may notice that problems dissolve without confrontation. Outcomes arrive without struggle. Timing aligns without planning. Obstacles fade without being fought. This can feel unsettling at first. The mind expects effort to be required. It expects tension to precede resolution. It expects struggle to justify outcome. But when coherence replaces effort, reality adjusts silently. Many emphasize something critical here. When reality responds quietly, it means resistance has ended. This is why the response feels subtle. There is no friction left to announce change. You may also notice that forcing now breaks alignment. When you push, things stall. When you rush, signals blur. When you insist, outcomes distort. But when you remain neutral, when you stay present, when you allow timing to unfold, reality moves with you. Again, many say this is not luck. This is not coincidence. This is not external reward. This is dimensional compatibility. The system is no longer correcting your interference. It is cooperating with your stability. If life has started to feel smoother without becoming easier, if challenges resolve without emotional charge, if progress happens without tension, then those who've experienced this want you to understand clearly. Reality is not favoring you. It is no longer resisting you. Nothing needs to be added. At this stage, many working with Arcturian frequency reveal one of the most counterintuitive truths of the fifth dimension. Nothing needs to be added. Not more knowledge, not more techniques, not more practices, not more identity upgrades, because what you are experiencing now is not activation, it is completion. In lower dimensional awareness, progress feels additive. you gather insights, you stack experiences, you build towards something. But in the fifth dimension, many describe progression becoming subtractive. What falls away is excess effort, mental noise, identity pressure, emotional overprocessing. Many call this phase field sufficiency, a state where awareness no longer feels incomplete. You may notice less hunger for answers, less urgency to improve yourself, less desire to fix what isn't broken. This can feel uncomfortable to the mind because the mind equates movement with growth. But many clarify, when coherence stabilizes, seeking becomes interference. This is why new techniques start to feel heavy, why excessive information feels draining, why constant self-work begins to feel misaligned. Not because learning is wrong, but because addition is no longer required. You are no longer becoming, you are operating, and operation requires clarity, not accumulation. This is where many misunderstand what's happening. They think they are stagnating, but stagnation feels dull, contracted, resistant. What you feel now is open, neutral, complete. Many emphasize completion does not feel euphoric, it feels quietly sufficient. If you notice that you no longer chase teachings, that you no longer need constant insight, that you feel whole without explanation, then those who've experienced this want you to understand clearly. You are not missing anything. You have stopped interfering with what is already online. Final transmission, stabilization beyond the threshold. If you stayed until this moment, those working with Arcturian frequency want you to understand this clearly. You were not waiting for permission. You were not waiting for activation. You were not waiting for confirmation. You were waiting for recognition. Many report they do not transmit urgency. They do not persuade. They do not convince. They observe coherence and respond only when it stabilizes. This transmission did not move you into the fifth dimension. It arrived because you were already there. That is why nothing here felt shocking. That is why nothing felt exaggerated. That is why everything felt strangely familiar. You were not learning something new. You were remembering a state you already occupy. The fifth dimension, many say, is not a destination. It is not a future. It is not an escape from the world. It is the moment when perception stops fragmenting reality and begins inhabiting it fully. From here forward, many suggest, do not look for signs, do not measure progress, do not test alignment, do not wait for proof. Proof belongs to identity, stability belongs to awareness. Many emphasize this final truth. When coherence is complete, reality no longer needs instruction. You do not need to hold a frequency. You do not need to protect a state. You do not need to maintain anything. What is stable sustains itself. From this point on, your only task is non-interference. Let reality respond. Let silence inform. Let timing unfold without pressure. You are not ascending. You are settled. Remain still. No music, no thought, no expectation. This stillness is not empty. It is where the fifth dimension remains visible.